One of the things I was struggling with when I first not launched it versus like subsequent launches was that traditional here's a webinar workshop felt too like salesy, and it's not like slides and like PDFs, and the program is really like I'm literally showing you what I'm doing in my business. And so this is where the private podcast comes in, because it's an accurate reflection of what's in the actual program, which is me sometimes just talking and saying, here's the real tea that's happening right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another case study episode. Today we have Andréa Jones on, and it's going to be a great conversation because not only is she like a social media pro, like excellent podcaster, love her content, go follow her, especially on IG, but she has been using private podcasting a lot throughout her business, and some actually really unique launch strategies that I think are something that a lot of our users want to know. Like, how is it actually working? We kind of get the core stuff, we get the, call replays, but like, how are people using it strategically in their marketing efforts in order to draw in new people? So she's going to give us the lowdown on that, and we're just really excited to chat with you about it.
Yay, I'm excited to be here. I love geeking out about this stuff. It's so fun to me.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel like in your content, you're always like, okay, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's like trends I'm seeing. And so I'm curious to talk to you about it from that angle as well. There's a lot of stuff going on in DMs right now in Instagram, a lot of stuff in the like ManyChat world. And I'm just seeing that kind of convo happening. And so it'll be interesting, I think, from your perspective as, somebody who runs social media for lots of folks, like what's working, what's not, and like how does like private podcasting fit in that too. So just having your expertise on that level too, I think is huge for us. So we're super excited to chat.
Yeah.
But why don't we start a little bit with your business and like your business model? So then we can talk about, okay, where did you see private podcasting fit in that?
Yeah, for sure. So I am all about social media and marketing. The biggest part of our revenue is our services. So done for you social media services, typically for online businesses that sell courses or education products. We also now work with app and software companies as well, which
Oh,
is a
really?
lot of fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe
Good
we
to
should
know.
Yeah. A lot of fun. Basically, the types of brands who want to be a little bit different on social media. They don't want to just hire the cheapest person to just post something. They want to try different things. So that's most of the business. We also have programming at the Savvy Social School, which teaches folks exactly what we do in our agency. And in the Savvy Social School, we have a professional level where I also mentor other social media managers and agency owners, which will come up later when we talk about how I use private podcasts.
Cool.
Love it.
Okay. And so take us back to when you first kind of heard about private podcasting. You've actually been using us for a while. So tell us, like, you were like, oh, this sounds cool. Like, why? And where did you see it fitting in services? And clearly it fits in courses, but just even thinking about like where it fits in your business.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember who I saw doing it, but I just remember signing up for something,
Mm.
and then they were like, "Here, you can listen to this on the go." And I was like, "Wait, what is this magic?" Because as a podcaster, that's my
Mm.
primary way of like also consuming content. Even I get annoyed sometimes with YouTube videos where I'm like, I gotta keep this screen open. I can't navigate to something else on my phone. That's annoying. I want to just
100%.
listen to it in the background. And so that's really what got me on like, oh, I can have like my public facing podcast, but then also have a private stream for specific purposes. And I believe I want to say it was Angie Jordan's private podcast, because she does like master classes as private podcasts. And that's what I remember. It could have been someone else, but that was the first time where I was like, oh, this could be like my lead magnet as a private
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And as someone who is definitely better talker than a writer, if you ask me to write a blog, it will take me 10 years. You ask me to do a podcast, I'm like, right now, sure, let's go. So for me, it just made a lot more sense to start thinking about like, how can I lean into my personal strengths and still deliver this content in a way that helps people consume it?
I love that. Do you remember the type of lead magnet? Now, this is a lead magnet for your agency, right? Is kind of what you started with. Do you remember the type or what you were the initial content you used in the lead magnet?
Yeah. So the first time I created a lead magnet, I did a 3-part series called Raise Your Rates. And it was for my new program that I launched in the pandemic because we had extra time. This is before kids too. So I was like, I got time. And it was for social media managers looking to grow into agency model. And I was getting so many questions from people at that time about how to do it. And typically the first step is you're not priced appropriately to hire a team, right? Like we got to fix that problem first. And then you can start hiring a team and building out your agency. And so I recorded it instead of I usually do master classes or webinars, things like that. I recorded it as a 3-part series, an audio format. And that was like my first entry point into using that as a lead magnet, which just felt natural to me. I was like, oh, this is it. I found it.
I love that. Does
And
that still exist today? It may have evolved, but have you continued to use it and it's been effective to get leads?
Yes, yes. And I've tried other topics, but that first topic it's still our most popular one for lead magnets. And then I've also created products now that are private podcasts. So one of my favorites is inside of our program, we have a product called The Feed, which is like a social media news podcast. Again, if I had to write, here's what's happening in social media this week, it would just take me forever. But I see like articles happen all the time. I can quote sources. My team can then add the links after. And I just can sit and talk about like, here's social media news, here's what it means for businesses. And so that lead magnet part was the start of it, but I use it in other ways as well. And just having like individual products where it's like, if you need this sort of support, then yeah, here you go. And I can charge for it.
Love it. That's the thing that holds people up. They're like, "Are people paying for audio things?" And we're like,
Sure,
"Yes, they are."
yes. Yeah.
100%. Cool. Okay, so let's dive into some of the launch strategies you're using. So you hinted at it. You have a membership that this is where you help agency people step into agency, becoming agency owners. So yeah, why don't you give us a little background on the feed, and then we can kind of get into how it's working and like what some of the results are for it.
Yeah. So in the membership, it is a very like behind the scenes, pull back the curtain style membership. And so one of the things I was struggling with when I first not launched it versus like subsequent launches was that traditional here's a webinar workshop felt too like salesy. And the program
Mm.
itself is not it's not like slides and like PDFs. And the program is really, I'm literally showing you what I'm doing in my business. And sometimes that means I'm just talking. And sometimes it means I'm sharing my spreadsheet that I use. So you can use it too. And so this is where the private podcast comes in because it's an accurate reflection of what's in the actual program, which is me sometimes just talking and saying, here's the real tea that's happening right now. So I created the Raise Your Rates private podcast. And in the podcast, I wanted to try to figure out how to tell if people were listening. Because I like when I first launched this too, it wasn't as techy as it is now. So we talk about like the evolution of it, but
Mhm.
it really was just like I recorded it, I uploaded it, and then people could get it. And I was not tracking like who was signing up. There's a way where you can have emails and you could see. I didn't have that set up. I had my convert kit, and then it was like, here's the link. You can listen here. And so I wanted to know like how far people were listening in and what episodes they were on. And so every single episode, I said, hey, DM me on Instagram and I'll give you a free resource based on that episode. And this was not automated at all. I was manually responding to people as they DM'd me, but it gave me so much opportunity to connect with people after they consume the content. So they would listen to the episode, they DM me and say, hey, you mentioned the script in the episode. I'd love to grab the script. I'm like, here's a script. By the way, like, did you have any takeaways or anything like that? And then as the program was launching, it was like, hey, I talk about this in the private podcast. Are you interested in joining? Very manually like scrolling back through DMs, messaging people. But it totally changed how that process was. It was way more asynchronous. So, they didn't have to sign up for a webinar to get their question answered. They can ask me in the DM and then they can listen as life is lifing, like go about their day. So that was the first iteration of that. And from there, people would then join the program. And I really could actually see more intimately what they were about beforehand because I was like creeping their Instagram. And so by the time they joined, I felt like I already knew them versus again, like this webinar where I just see their little face on Zoom.
I
This
love
is
that.
so good. I was like, What I love about it is we always talk about the intimacy of podcasts, which probably I don't know if you've talked to any of the people who converted in that manner or something, but like there is something pretty special about DMs, right? Like when you engage in a conversation with somebody you've been following for a while, you're watching them and documenting their life on stories, like you feel close to them. And so then here's this like sales content, right? Like essentially that you now know they listen to, and then they're there. That's a cool connection. That's very, what you're pointing out is very different than a webinar where someone comes in the chat like, "Oh yeah, I'm in." It feels very like one-way transactional. It always has. I think that's like the part about webinars that people are just we're like evolving past them, you know what I mean? And so here you are saying like, you don't even have to use all the fancy stuff that Hello Audio does for doing this the first time. Like the goal is to talk to these people. And because it's a private podcast, right? And because you're basically putting like an Easter egg to get them to do that, you're now like creating that connection that yeah, would be very different in a webinar. Like, how weird would a webinar be? Like, hey, DM me if you want, the end of this. But it's not like the same setup. But a podcast is like, I listened to this when I had time. And now she's asking for my input or whatever. I'm going to go engage with her. And that's like next level kind of lead, right? Because it's like they listened and then they like feel confident messaging you. They have questions. They're like now engaged. And that creates like a total different sales process. Typically one that doesn't feel so yeah, like being sold to. It's more just like, cool, here's this person who just gave me some really interesting information and now I get to talk to her about it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, it's we already did it in our business and why I struggled previously with other launch mechanisms, specifically for this program, because it was missing the intimacy piece.
Mm,
One of our other programs, for instance, we have a free course that works really well to convert people into the program because that's what it is. It's a course. So having a course, go to the course made sense. But even then, we found that when we added I have 7 audio streams now, and we're probably going to do more. So
cool.
we put all the course content as the audio. We found that the consumption rate of the course went up too. So it's like there's so many different ways that we use this in the business. But for me, it's all about I want it to be reflective of the experience that they're about to have
Mm.
when they actually then buy the thing.
I
Love
could
that.
also see that as it opens the door for like, hey, maybe you're not ready for this yet, right? I think that's a big thing people are talking about in our space too. It's like not trying to convert every single person, but convert people that actually like are in the right place because that creates better results, better testimonials, and then they love you for that. And so that level of qualification, like pre-qualification that isn't like a form or something, it's yeah, again, the DMs are the place that happens. And I love that you brought up I was already doing this in my business. So for people listening who this is how they tend to make sales for services and stuff like that, this is going to feel very natural and you said async. That is what we love about podcasting is like if you're not available or they're not available or whatever, like they can still get that content in a way that is like frictionless. We like to think it feels very frictionless to get into a podcast app. But then they then can then engage with you then real time. Then comes that like convo that can happen. And I think that's really cool too. Just wanted to point out the layers of that.
Oh yeah. And I do think too with I for me, if I was listening to a private podcast, I'd be a lot more likely to DM someone versus any other medium, download a PDF. What I really that just feels a little different versus me having your
Mm,
voice in my ears. I feel like I know you, I kind of get what you're about just by listening to you, and I'm a lot more likely to engage. And I do think as we've all seen, I know the three of us have seen it, I know everyone listening has probably seen this, people are just more skeptical of buying things. And so they do need more personal touch. They do need more of those connection points. And so this strategy, I think, is going to even be more important as we move forward throughout this year, I mean, I just, as the economy has shifted, that personal touch is really important for high ticket or those intimate programs where you're really trusting someone to help you with a major transformation in your life or your business. So that's awesome.
Love it. And we've evolved this over the years too,
mhm.
right? Like we started with, okay, just DM me and I'll manually respond. But we're using tools like ManyChat now where they DM the keyword and that part can be automated, but I'm still seeing the DM. So then I can still personally follow up again asynchronously. And I love voice notes too. So this plays into that where it's on Instagram. So I send a voice note. So it feels like a continuation of that private podcast. And then getting more fancy with the Hello Audio setup too, so that I can, oh, like this person signed up in ConvertKit and I can see them in Hello Audio. Like, yay, we can actually start tracking this a little bit better. So there's some ways that we've improved it over the years, but at its core, like I now when I think about creating new things, I'm like, could this be a private podcast? Because that would be the fastest way for me to create it personally. And then also there's so much intimacy in it that it makes it easier for that person to make a decision listening on the other end.
Yeah, we do that all the time here. We're like, okay, is this a private podcast? Like podcast check.
Yeah.
And usually it's like yes, or as a supplement, but it's funny how we almost have to like unlearn those marketing things where you're just like you automatic go, this is an email sequence. And it's like, wait, does it have to be? Or like we even us, the creators of it, still have to be like, wait, we should probably have a feed for that. And we don't. So
Yeah. Yeah.
True. And it's so much easier. I think now with kids, with
Mm,
life, even with, I mean, I don't know how to find the time to create full blown courses with slide decks and videos. It's just so much easier to just hit record and be wherever and know that, with the Dolby integration, if you mess up, if the audio is not super clean, you can clean it up really easily. It just makes the creation process easier too, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we're working on turning a lot of our programming into private podcasts as well. Because of that, it's just more accessible for our community. And also when I look at new things now, I'm like, but can I listen to it on the go? Because I have a 2-year-old to chase after over here, you know? So I think this is just like the next evolution of all of the things. And it'll be so interesting to see too how more and more companies use it outside of just like educational products, which is my world
mm,
and where I live, but also working with there's so many different ways companies could use it. So one of the things we're thinking about in our company is because most of our business is services, creating an audio feed for our clients that's just like, hey, here's an update that you need to know. I typically do this as Loom videos,
mm,
but now I'm thinking, should we also put this on a private podcast feed? So it's like
mm.
everything I think about now, I'm like, I feel like there's a way we could do this because I personally just love it so much.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. And in agencies too, I think one of the big things we've seen is we have agencies that like onboarding with audio. I
Mhm.
think because as an agency, right, we all know setting those expectations is super important before they get in the door. Understanding your process, the way you communicate, your boundaries, like all of that, I think is something that we've also seen. So that could be your next feed or maybe your fourth
Sorry,
next
Andrea's
feed.
team.
Sorry,
She
but it's yeah.
Yeah. I'm
she's like,
like,
"Wait a
wait a
second."
second.
We've had real positive feedback about that though, so that's something that could be interesting. Could be
Yeah,
another
especially I
another
think
feed.
something like social media too. It's like you're almost reselling them on why they picked you out of all the agencies they could have picked or of like the cheap VA or whatever. You're reselling them on that and by sharing the framework and how you think about social content, the person's going to be like, "Yep." And then like now they're heading into the first call or getting their first deliverables being like, "Cool." Like now I get where they're going versus being like, I paid. I hope this works out because I've done that before. Like, here's
Mhm.
$5,000. Like, shit, I hope this is the right person or the right team, right? And then maybe they don't hit that mark and you're just like, bummer. But that disconnection after paying, I think, to the first deliverables, the first calls, the onboarding, that in between time could be a really great time to fill with audio
Mhm.
because you set up a like super happy client potentially. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to come back on a future podcast episode
Yeah.
and talk about how we have changed our onboarding process to
That'd
now
be
use audio component.
cool.
Because
Right.
yeah, now my mind is spinning in a million different ways, and my team's gonna be like, dang.
Right. You're like, "I want this done by the time I'm back after mat leave."
Exactly. The clock
Yeah,
is a ticking.
yeah.
Love
Cool.
it.
I know we're going back a little bit, but I'd love to hear, like, a little bit about the results from those launches. If you have any numbers on, like, conversion rates or, like, whenever you started tracking, even if it's testimonials or commentary on the experience from the position of your new members.
Yes. So I keep a program very small intentionally because it's almost like a side hustle for me at this point because my main thing is agency. So the first round we had 10 people. So we sold out the program at 10. We increased capacity to 20 people and we sold it out at 20. So now we're at 25 and we just started another launch. So it's always open. So when more space comes available, we can add more people in, but I keep it small because there's so much one-on-one from me.
Mm.
Um, and so this next round, we may sell that out as well. For the numbers, I know that when we first launched it, we had about 400 people download and it like in my ConvertKit, I could see 400 people came in there. And then as far as DMs, I really didn't track it the first week.
Yeah.
This time around, we just started the launch. I'm looking at ManyChat. We have 11 people who DM'd me the word script. We just started running ads like 2 days ago. So that's cool that they already like downloaded it and started listening and got the keyword from that. And we've already had one person sign up
Wow.
as well
Wow.
for the program. Now I know her because I've been DMing her for the past couple of years. And she's like, I'm finally ready.
Mm.
And so I think that's part of this too is it's like a continuation. I've done 2 other private podcast lead magnets as well for this same program. And so I can see that she's listened to all of them. And so at this point, she's like, I was just waiting to get myself together and then I'm ready. So that's anecdotally some of the success from that. So we'll see how this next launch goes. I'm really excited about it, but so far it's looking great.
Cool. I like the use of ManyChat because that is one downside to like Instagram DMs is we lose like unless I don't know they've added labels or whatever like folders that don't quite make sense in my head when I look at them. But I'm not surprised that you weren't able to track that because that's really hard. You would have to like go in, put the name of the person. That would be a whole bunch of manual stuff. And where ManyChat, you can at least see the sequence that they're in or like what they've engaged with. And I think that's really powerful from a perspective of yeah, and I'm sitting here being like too, like how can Hello Audio and ManyChat, what does that look like as we're like thinking about, whatever potential integrations, but also just like following up with people and some automations that we could, especially with actions. I'm like sitting here brainstorming publicly with Nora, but like, right, we have an
Yeah.
action, someone listens to something. Does something happen in ManyChat? Is that possible? I don't know. But yeah, as a tool that like is helping people organize their DMs a little bit, I think it could be a little better at that. But like automating that follow up and getting assets and signing up for stuff, there's definitely some power there for sure.
Yeah, and so now I have everyone tagged as like, this is where they came in from.
Hmm.
And then I also can give them other resources along the way, hopefully follow up with them with this launch. But it's interesting that you said Hello Audio and ManyChat because I was thinking about too for the next launch, asking up front, what is your Instagram handle? And then that
Mm-hmm.
way, if let's say they missed the emails or they haven't had a chance to listen, I can actually see who's not listening and say,
Yep.
"Oh, you haven't started yet." Just a quick reminder that this is probably sitting in your podcast app right now waiting for you.
Yeah.
So I think something like that could be fun for the next time around.
Hmm. Okay. My
Yeah.
wheels are turning. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious with your audience. Now with I would assume agency owners and folks that are interested in social media are probably above average when it comes to tech savviness, right? But not all of them are maybe podcast listeners. And I know that's something that we get a lot. We get questions like, hey, I don't know if my audience listens to podcasts and I'm nervous that they might not know how to do it. And I'm curious if you had folks maybe in your audience that they've never even heard of private podcasts and this may have been their first experience consuming content if you got feedback or if they were like, wow, like kind of like, I know for us, this is a game changer and now I need it for everything I purchase. But I wasn't sure what did your audience think about it?
Yeah, I get that more so on our programming side because you're
Mm.
right. The agency owners, or even like social media managers who want to be agency owners, are a unique group in that we are chronically online and we're like trying tech all the time. But like a business owner who's maybe like at education business and they just set up their ConvertKit and they're just getting into this world. Now they have a private podcast. We do see some resistance where they're like, I don't quite get how this works. And so in the onboarding, we link to just the page where they can listen. And that has really like reduced the resistance because it's the same thing basically. You don't need to download the app if you don't want to. If you're not in the podcasting world and you're like, I don't even know which app to listen through. It's like, that's fine. Just here's the page with it's like all the episodes, just hit play and listen. That has been the best way for us to kind of circumnavigate that. And also, we do multiple ways of sharing the same content. So, especially with our paid offer. So, the feed being a great example, it's like our news podcast. Most people listen through the podcast, but we also embed the audios in the course and we also add the transcripts in the course as well. So, I can see that some people choose to listen like in our course section versus in the podcast where most people listen. So, giving them kind of like multiple ways to consume it has helped as well with some of that resistance. But you're right, it is a little bit just slightly technical, but since podcasting for me is like my main marketing tool, most of my people understand podcasts.
Yeah.
That
And
makes
I think,
sense.
yeah, then they find it and they're like, oh, yeah, this is actually really easy. And I can listen without being attached to a screen. It's like, why don't more people do this? So and it sounds like your content consumption goes up regardless. Like and when your content consumption goes up, I'm assuming your conversions are also going up as well.
Yes. Yes. And, for me too, having it in our programs, I can see like it's really hard to get people to consume a course. This is
It
not
really
new.
is. Yeah.
It's like really hard. I would say buy it. Like as a human, we're like, oh, that's satisfying. I feel like I made progress because I bought it. I'll look at it later. And so for me, I'm like, oh no, we need to have something that's like, hey, can you do this now? Even for a more technical
Mm,
things where I'm technically sharing a screen, but we say at the beginning of the podcast, like the very first episode, I'm going to be screen sharing. This is meant to be video, but I know you're here because you're listening on the go. So if you hear some me referring video, just go to that video lesson and watch it. And it's increased like the amount of people who are actually able to get through the content versus waiting for them to remember to log into our course platform and watch it
mhm.
from there with everything else happening in their lives.
I love that you do that because there's this group of creators, like course creators, who are like, well, my course has videos, so therefore I can't. And I'm like, guys, someone
Listen.
listening to the content and not taking action is still okay. And it's better than not listening to anything. Can we like all agree on that? Cool. Because if you're in the app and they're like, oh shit, this is where Andrew is taking me with these episodes. Now I'm actually going to log in and go do it. You've actually just like connected in a way, and you could have lost that person because of what you're saying. Logging to the site, remembering the passcode, like all the things that are, I have to be at my computer, I have to like make time for it because that's extra stuff. It's not like running my business. There's so many layers to why we don't do courses. But when you have it in a podcast app and you don't have to sign into anything and you see it next to the true crime thing that you're listening to, you're like, shit, I should probably listen to this. Right? Like, guys, that is so worth it, even if it's super technical. And all you have to do is redirect them back to your course. If you want to like take a little bit of a risk, you could put it on YouTube, like private. There's risk from the downloading perspective. But like the reality is like, you just want people to do the thing, help them. So I love that you brought that up because that's something I've been as a teacher, like telling people, guys, I'm telling you, even as a teacher, it's okay if they're supposed to be watching it and they're not. It's better than not. I promise.
Yep, yep, yep. And I think there's always going to be some people who will never listen to the private podcast.
Sure.
I think about that with
100%.
with my lead magnet being the private podcast. I know that there are certain people who will never listen to it, which is why for that particular program, it just makes the most sense because if they don't listen to this, they're not going to like how I deliver this program at
Oh,
all.
that's interesting thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it also matches internally what we do so
Mm,
well because that program also has a private podcast where I'm like, okay, I'm in the middle of heading into maternity leave. Here's what's really happening in my business, right?
mm,
And so that really helps for that program. So I think that's part of it too, is like to me, yes, the consumption rates go up. And also for other products, I offer a variety of ways people can consume the content.
yes.
And I think that's super important, especially now. I love that there's such an emphasis on accessibility because it means we're focused on making things better for our
Mm,
communities, which is really where this all comes down to.
totally. There was a line of thinking that I just had that just was like, "Oh yeah, how are your ads doing?" We had a couple of guests on that have been talking more about ads and stuff. How are you talking about, so you are reaching this broad audience and maybe they won't download the thing, but a common question we get is like, do you call it private podcast? Do you call it secret podcast? Do you call it, exclusive? So what are you doing if you want to give us a little insight? I know I didn't prep you to talk about that, but I'm just curious with your thoughts on how that's going as you talk about like your private podcast publicly.
Yeah, because we did actually have to change that early on. We were calling
Okay,
it a
cool.
private podcast, and people were like, "Oh, what?"
Like, why would you make it private? Like, what
Right.
does that mean? Yeah.
No, we actually call it a free audio training in
Hmm.
advertisements and on the sales page and in the follow-up emails, it's called a free audio training because that's like training is a word people are familiar with.
Mm.
Especially, we're talking to marketers too, so they kind of understand, oh, this is probably kind of like a webinar or masterclass. And so we had to change that language early on because we were saying private podcast and like people weren't downloading it. They weren't even putting their email address in. We were like, what is happening with our ads?
You're like, it's obvious.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't know what a private podcast is? And so to skip the education on the front end, we just
Mm.
call it a free audio training. And then as they get into it, I call it private podcast because that's what we call it in our programs, a private podcast. And it's like super secret exclusive content. And we can like describe what it is more once they get into it. But yeah, you're right. We had to initially change it. We haven't tested going back because
Mm.
once we changed it to free audio training, people
And it
started
was
downloading it.
working.
We're like,
Yeah.
this is it. So I am curious, like now, I guess we're like 4 years later now. If we called it a private podcast, would people know? Because it's definitely risen
Mm.
in popularity since we first
I
started.
see some A/B testing in your future. Yeah, it's true. And part of me as I was listening to you is like, this is our job. Our job is to make this like a known thing. And it's always been hard for us even talking about it. And it does actually seem like who we're talking to private podcast is the thing that makes sense because we're talking to the people that are going to deliver it. But doesn't mean that their audience, like couple like away from us, doesn't know what Hello Audio is, doesn't know how it's delivered, but like it ends up in my podcast player. Okay, I can see. And I think, yeah, there's something there. So, yes, I do believe we've made headway in the last couple of years on helping with that. But yeah, it could be interesting from your perspective if that could actually possibly, add some conversion rate, like up your conversion rate now that it's been a few years.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking now too, like I should like share my affiliate link to Hello Audio because I'm talking to marketers. They're probably curious about this too.
What are you
See what
doing?
Yeah.
models I know.
I
I was
love how
gonna
this is like a
ask.
coaching call for
I
both of
know.
us. Like,
I know, I
Great
like that
coach.
actually. But it
yeah.
was something I was gonna ask if in your programs where you're teaching
Mm.
and helping these agency owners, if a private podcast is a strategy that you've shared, like you've shared
Ah.
your strategy behind the scenes, and if it's something that you recommend, because we don't just have agency owners, but we have a lot of creators that are like, I don't know if I should do this. Is this going to work? And I wasn't sure if that's something that you teach. And if you do, yes, you should absolutely be using your like, but I want to
100%.
get you that credit, right? But I'm curious if you've talked to or what you might share with someone, maybe in your program or someone else who hasn't started, but are like, yeah, I don't know if this is going to work for
Mm.
me. Like, any advice you would give them?
Yeah. I just released a new course about my podcast, but I have a whole section of that about how private podcasts fit into like my business model. And I do have my affiliate link in there. We
Yes.
soft launched it already. It'll be launching fully. Like it's on the website. We'll do a full launch of it. So I do share like here's all the ways that I use private podcasts in my business.
Especially as they experience it because they're actually coming in through that way. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Because that course has a private podcast. And so I think it's interesting because there are so many different ways to use it that I haven't explored yet, but I don't necessarily teach the technical side of it because to be honest, I don't fully use all of everything that's available. And I see it's so super valuable for like if anyone is a funnel builder, I
Mm.
could totally see you like layering this into your services, right? Like
Mhm.
your funnel building agency, or even if you create lead magnets or things like that for your clients, if you help them record their course, like I see so many different angles for agency owners who work in digital marketing to like layer in Hello Audio as part of that process.
Love it. Yeah, definitely. I think we had Emily Reagan on relatively early
Mhm.
on, and she, as like who trains VAs, she had, I think one of the months she focused on, hey, this is a service you could offer your people, setting up a private podcast or helping them integrate it into their business. And so when you think about social media, podcasting doesn't like fit in social media, but it kind of does. Like people lump it in because it's a version of social media. And it's also something that gets shared on social media a lot. So that idea that a social media manager could come to a business owner and say, I have this cool idea that I've been seeing working, like that makes that person look really good. And it's easy to set up. So not only that, it's actually not like super complicated. So yeah, hit us up if you want help with training on the tech side or anything like that. We're happy to help your people.
I'm seriously going to have to go back through this episode and take notes. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that is a good idea. I should do a training on that. Yeah, I'm going to re-listen to this and take notes. I hope y'all listen to your
There you go. Right? Talk about a good, what is it? Like a sell of the episode, like the guest is sitting. It's like, I took notes on, we need to look at ManyChat and think like through this and taking the Instagram handle. It's okay. I love this. Cool. Go ahead.
If there was a private podcast with your life's ramblings, what would it be called?
Yes, it would be a very odd collection of things. So it'd probably be something like Oddly Living or something like that, because I feel like my hobbies outside of work are varied. Like I like crocheting. I watch heavily, exclusively RuPaul's Drag Race 24/7. It feels like I read a lot of spicy romance novels. I feel like it'd be that plus throw in all the mom stuff. I never would have considered myself anywhere close to a mom influencer, but half of my content now feels like it's related to mom and motherhood because it's so consuming. So I feel like that would have to go into the random odds and sods, Oddly Living show. I don't know.
We'll work on it. We'll work on the
I like
title.
it.
I get the concept. I'd get
Yeah.
that concept. Very cool. I know you're crocheting a blanket for your little one that's coming, right?
Yes.
Did you finish?
I am almost done. I just have to add the final touches. So it's pretty much done. And it's been such a fun project. So.
Yeah, I knitted a blanket for my first and I saw you post that and I was like, oh my God, we're such dorks.
Yeah.
Mine is not done yet, but I got a little more time than you.
Yeah. Well, I used to crochet a lot more before having kids. And then since having my first, I literally haven't touched my crochet stuff until now. And I was like, oh, I need to watch a YouTube video. How do I start again?
Like, how do I don't even cast on? I don't remember. Yeah, totally. That's funny. Well, it has been very enlightening. I knew this episode would be. I could not wait for it. When I saw your name on the calendar, I was like, yes. So guys, again, hope you took a lot of notes. Send them back to Andrea so she remembers to do them. Say, hey, remember when you said, no, I'm just kidding. You can DM her. You're allowed to. Clearly her DMs are open. No, but it was really fun having you on. And yeah, good luck with your birth and everything. And we'll definitely see you on the other side with some new podcasts and some new babies.
Oh, yeah. With 2 kids now, you best believe I'm doing asynchronous
more private podcasts.
Yeah, more private podcasts all the way. For sure.
100%. So maybe that's our new messaging, Nora. Something with having extra kids, because same with me. 100%.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I'm seriously going to go back and listen to this and start implementing some new things.
Awesome. And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.